Hi, I'm Mark Rushman. I'm Senior Curator of Art and Culture here at the Indiana State Museum. And we're talking to you today from the Fine Arts Storage at the Indiana State Museum. I thought we would talk a little bit about the very well-known T.C. Steele, Theodore Clement Steele. Steele lived from 1847 until 1926, and he's probably one of our best-known Indiana artists. Most people know Steele from his time in southern Indiana, Brown County, doing landscapes. He was an American Impressionist, and they recognize his very painterly landscapes, broad vistas, all different times of the year. But a lot of people don't know that he was actually very much classically trained. He attended the Royal Academy in Munich, Germany, and it was there that he learned drafting skills, life drawing skills, and very much about working with the anatomy. So after he returned from Munich, he was there from 1880 until 1885. He returned to Indianapolis and set up his studio and became a very much sought after portrait artist. In fact, you're looking at one of his portraits right here. Again, most people wouldn't associate this type of work with Steele when they think of his very painterly, lush landscapes. But this is a beautiful portrait by then Governor Alvin Peterson Hovey, and he was the governor from 1889 until 1901. And this shows Steele's amazing drafting skills, his ability to capture the likeness of the person in a very much a representational manner. So again, it was very different from his landscapes. In total, Steele did 9 governor's portraits, more than any other artist. And he also did many of the leading Indiana residents of the day. People like Eli Lilly commissioned him to do the work. So that, again, to give you a little bit of foundation on Steele, we're now going to look at some of his landscapes and get a little bit of that background. So we're going to move here to the front storage rack here in Fine Art. And as you can see, we have a good number of his pieces up on the rack, and this is how we store them to protect the pieces. And on this wall, we have a good number of his landscapes and some of his architectural drawings as well. Let me stop that right here. Looking at something like this, this is a typical Steele landscape from southern Indiana. This was painted in 1914. Those of you might be familiar with House of the Singing Winds, just outside of Nashville. Steele moved there in 1907, and he remained there until his passing in 1926. Before I get ahead of myself here, I should mention that when Steele returned from Munich, he set up residence in Indianapolis. He set up a studio and took on the commissions, but he was also painting what was familiar to him. This is a painting from 16th Street. He lived in close proximity on the near north side of downtown Indianapolis. And this is just kind of a winter neighborhood scene. Again, not only landscapes and portrait, but just kind of capturing everyday life in Indianapolis. This is another piece that Steele, let me pull the rack just a little bit more so we can get a look at it. Steele did a number of downtown scenes as well. This is the Monument Circle. You can see the people standing around. And this was a favorite subject of Steele's and very much sought after by collectors, this genre of work. So, as I mentioned, Steele was in Indianapolis from about 1885 until just before 1907. He and Selma Steele built a house that we call it the House of the Singing Winds in southern Indiana, and it was really there that he transitioned away from doing portraits to doing the thing that he wanted to do most, which was paint landscapes. And if you've been in southern Indiana or you've been fortunate enough to be at the House of the Singing Winds, you can see what an inspiration that would have been for a landscape painter. Again, the painting down here that you're looking at from 1914, a very large painting. This vast vista of southern Indiana, capturing the rolling hills. This was probably done in late spring, early summer, from the color range that we're looking at here, not into the fall, which let's see if we can find maybe one of his fall paintings. Actually, so that's a piece that was probably done in the summer, and as the Impressionists were likely to do, they want to catch the different seasons of the year. So this one would have been painted in the fall, and that's evident by the palette that he's got here. More of the oranges and the burnt umbers and a much more muted palette, but still very lushly painted, very much in the tradition of Steele's work. Hanging next to this piece, we actually have a smaller landscape. Again, looks like maybe a late spring or summer scene, and it's actually an image of the House of the Singing Winds. The house is still there. It's been completely restored and has much of the original content still in it. The property itself is 211 acres with the house, also the large studio, which is actually, if you look at the painting above it right there, what looks like a big brown barn, that's actually the large studio where Steele was fortunate enough to have his own studio where he worked every day. He would go out onto his property or in the area and paint, and then bring those paintings back into the studio and finish them up. So he really had the perfect situation to work. All he had to do was walk outside the door, and he could find inspiration and the landscape to paint all times during the year, and then he would make those available for people to buy.